So actually, I liked how you started this article. Of course, the whole cover this week was about, well, it's provocative, right? It's like, how bad can it get?
Yeah.
So your heading was actually prudence versus growth. And the way you started it was that Malaysia is not entirely to blame. So are you saying that the bogeyman that we think, the economic bogeyman we think, is it all in our heads?
It's not all in our heads.
It's not all in our heads, yeah?
But I think it's quite true to say that not everything is our fault.
Okay.
So certain external headwinds, falling oil prices, US Fed interest rates, those things cause markets to become volatile. And as the government always say, we're an open economy, so we are vulnerable to that to some extent, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But the funny thing was, I read this one particular part, and I think some people will either disagree or find it odd that you say that we do have a well-diversified economy. We always seem to think that Malaysia is highly dependent on oil. So I was surprised to read that. It's like, is our economy diversified enough so it didn't like feel the shock as badly?
Well, we were dependent on oil to an extent. I think about 30% of our government revenue came from oil before the crash. Now it's about 14%. But we do have other industries that can pick up. Manufacturing is one of them. A large part of our economy is based on manufacturing. So the oil price crash was actually cushioned to a certain extent by the fact that our economy don't depend entirely on oil.
So prudence versus growth is your heading, and I was thinking it's interesting. At this point, when oil was down, did we have to sacrifice one for the other?
Not yet.
Not yet?
I think that the discussion for that is still premature. What the government has shown is that they've taken steps, very prudent steps, things like withdrawing broad-based subsidies that usually disproportionately benefit the rich. And then they've implemented the goods and services tax. These are structural changes that are necessary. And also they've on their own end cut their own spending. So these are signs of their prudence. But whether or not these steps or this level of prudence will be sacrificed eventually to come up with policies that would help stimulate growth will come probably only when we see a worse economic slowdown.
But actually, that point might be moot, right? Because right now, oil is 50.
Correct.
You know, and all this panic that happened, all the budget readjustments and everything all happened when it looked like oil was heading for the bottom.
Correct.
And now oil is 50. And because of that, from what you wrote, does the government now have more wiggle room for the growth rather than the prudence?
I think the danger is that the thing with discipline is that once you let it go, you let it go.
That's true.
$50 a barrel is significantly more room. It gives you a comfort zone from the government's $30 to $35 a barrel estimate. It also is above Petronas' own estimate. So, but we've seen with the oil price crash that it can happen very rapidly, and it can also rebound very rapidly. If you think about just mid-January, we're looking at $28, $29 a barrel. Now we're at $50 again. So it's hard to say where we go. So it's always better to, be cautious.
But at least from what it seems to be is that at least the government did the kind of right thing, right? They acted really, really fast.
Yeah.
Whether it's because you had to have your hand forced, but they did do it fast enough. But it seems to be in a way that still is quite unpopular. Now that there is a bit more room to grow, do you think they will try to be popular again? From what all the analysts are saying, anyway.
I think no one's really looking at the government implementing particular stimulus plans just yet. It's not quite as bad to deserve that. If you see the economy contracting, if you see nominal GDP decelerating, if you see maybe a recession, then we can think about the government stepping in, doing something, pumping money into the economy or something like that. But right now it's too soon. Nobody really thinks that it's time for that yet.
And actually, that's funny. I suppose you say that also because all the analysts that you interviewed for this piece all seem to say the exact same thing. When you talk to them, that they all seem very, I won't say cautious, but they were very guarded on the Malaysian economy.
I think a lot of people are very reluctant to say that the economy is on a downhill. And I think they say that based on the data that they have, and data you can read one way or the other.
Very non-committal, actually.
Correct. So generally, I think the opinion is that the government and Malaysia is holding up just fine for now. If things get worse, then we will have to reassess. So that's the kind of sentiment we get.
But the growth part, yeah. Pump priming, you mentioned, expensive.
Correct.
When will it become necessary? At the moment, is it because like your heading says, how bad can it get? It's not that bad, but when will we start to grow?
When will we start to grow?
When will Malaysia start to grow, you wonder?
Malaysia is still growing.
Slower?
Slower, definitely. In the first quarter, we saw 4.2% GDP growth. It's a slower growth, yes, but it is still growing. And I don't think the government will think about doing anything dramatic unless we stop growing. So unless we see a contraction or a recession. That's my view, and I think the view of many economists. It's not worth it to just throw things in when you're not sure where it's going to hit.
For more on the stories, pick up a copy of The Edge Weekly at all good newsstands.